Welcome to Hook to Knot. In the CAL, we are in the process of making our pineapple stitch swatch and we have done up till row number 9. Now in the end, I'll make chain 3 and turn my work. SC in the chain 3 space, chain 3. Cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, which is 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC, chain 2, cluster stitch on cluster V stitch, so 2 DC, chain 1 and 2 DC, again chain 2, cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, chain 3, now we are in the pineapple area, so single crochet, chain 3, single crochet, chain 3. Now we are in the next cluster V area. See how my swatch is progressing. Now I have only one chain 3 space on the pineapple and the shape of my pineapple is complete. Now chain 3, cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, so 2 DC, chain 1 and 2 DC. Now chain 2, cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, chain 2, cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, chain 3, single crochet, chain 1 and HDC. Now as you see, my pineapple is complete. Now what will cover it up is the line of cluster V stitch. So one cluster V stitch line will go and cover up these half pineapples. One side will come and cover this full pineapple and the remaining one will go and cover this half pineapple. Now whatever is remaining in between, it will start with the new pineapple. After line 10 After line 10 is done, chain 1 and turn your work. SC in the very first chain 3 space. Now chain 3. Directly go to cluster V stitch. So cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch. 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC. Chain 2. Now we will have 9 DC in this space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. 9 DC, chain 2, jump onto next cluster V stitch, cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, chain 3, SC on the top of the pineapple, chain 3, cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, chain 2, 9 DC on the cluster V stitch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, chain 2, cluster V stitch on next cluster V stitch, 2 DC, 1 chain and 2 DC, chain 3, and SC in the chain 3 space. Now do you see how it is progressing? This portion has come here and here. Now this pineapple will close and these two pineapples will open. This is how the swatch will progress. After line 11, what I am going to do is chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, chain 5 and turn your work. Now I am directly going to cluster V stitch. Chain 1. Now what happens after 9 DC is DC on DC and chain 1. So chain 1 DC, chain 1 DC. Likewise we will go. See this. After last DC is done, chain 1, directly go into cluster V stitch. So cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, 2 DC, 1 chain and 2 DC in the same space. Now we have closed the pineapple. We are directly going into next cluster V stitch. 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, chain 1. Now again we are in the set of 9 DC. So DC on DC, chain 1. DC, chain 1. DC, chain 1. Likewise we will progress. After we are done with DC on the last DC, chain 1 into the cluster V stitch. So 2 DC, chain 1, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC in the same space, After this cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, I'm going to do a double treble crochet on this space. Double treble crochet means 1, 2, 3, yarn over 3 times and pull up a loop from the SC space, whatever we are seeing here. So pull up a loop from first two, then next two, then next two, and next two. This is how we will match to the chain 5 we have done in the first place. So chain 1, turn your work now DC in the very first space. I'll do 2 DCs in the cluster V stitch. I'm going to do it half. If you see, we have to merge 2 cluster V stitches. So I'm going to start with chain 3 and SC in the chain 1 space. So chain 3, SC, chain 3, SC, chain 3, SC, chain 3, SC. Total we will have 7 chain 3 spaces for pineapple. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I have these 2 cluster V stitches next to each other which I have to merge. So what I'm going to do is, like last time, I'm going to chain 3, put 2 DC in the first cluster V stitch, chain 1 and complete it in the second cluster V stitch. See, I have merged my cluster V stitches like I did here. So only 2 DC in the first space, then chain 1 and completing my remaining cluster on the top of next cluster V stitch. Again chain 3, SC in the chain 1 space. Likewise I'll create 7 chain 3 spaces for this pineapple too. Again 7 chain 3 spaces, chain 3, only 2 DCs on this cluster V stitch, and we are going to do a DC on this space. Now we will chain 1 and turn our work. I will do 3 DC in the very first space, chain 3. Now I am in the pineapple section. So my 7 chain 3 spaces will become 6 chain 3 spaces. Chain 3, SC, 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 chain 3, SC. Now chain 3. I will be doing a cluster V stitch directly into this space. Chain 1 between these. Chain 3. Now I am again into the pineapple area. So SC, chain 3. My 7 spaces will become 6. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. Now I will do 3 DCs on the very first space. So 1, 2 and 3. Chain 1 and turn your work. Now I will do a cluster V stitch in the very first space. So 2 DC, chain 1 and 2 DC in the very first space, chain 3. Now I am in the pineapple area. 6 chain 3 spaces will become 5 chain 3 spaces. See this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 chain spaces. Now chain 3, cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch. Chain 3. Now again I am into pineapple area. So 6 chain 3 spaces will become 5. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now chain 3 and cluster V stitch on the top of this first DC. So 2 DC, 1 chain and 2 DC in the same space. Do not worry if you see your swatch spreading away for a time being. When this pineapple will close, everything will come together. Now I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. We are on the line number 17. So I'm going to make a DC in the very first space, and I will continue a cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch. So 2 DC, 1 chain and 2 DC in the same space. Now chain 3. Again we are in the pineapple space. So last time we had 5 spaces. Now they will become 4. Chain 3, SC, chain 3, SC, chain 3, SC, chain 3, SC, chain 3. Now we have to make 1.5 cluster stitch. So 2 DC, 1 chain, 2 DC, and again I will make 1 chain and 2 DC in the same chain space. Chain 3. I am into next pineapple. So 5 chain 3 spaces will become now 4. Chain 3, SC, chain 3, SC, chain 3, SC, chain 3, SC. Directly chain 3, cluster V stitch in cluster V, continue that, and a DC on the very first stitch. So we will chain 1 and turn our work. Now we will do 3 DC in the very first space. 1, 2 and 3. Now cluster V stitch into cluster V stitch. So 2 DC, 1 chain and 2 DC at the same space. Chain 3. Now my chain 3 4 spaces will become 3 spaces. Pineapple is reducing. Chain 3. Like we did previously, we are going to do 2 cluster V stitches in this chain 1 spaces. So 2 DC, chain 1, 2 DC in the first space, and 2 DC, chain 1 and 2 DC in the next chain 1 space. Chain 3, and then we are into pineapple area. So my 4 chain 3 spaces are becoming 3, like this. 1, 2, 3. After I am done with cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch and 3 DCs on the very last DC, I'll chain 1 and turn my work. Now I'll do 3 DCs in the very first space, like what I did in the last row. Chain 2, cluster V stitch, on the cluster V stitch, chain 3. I'll go into the pineapple area. Now my 3 spaces will become 2 spaces. See, chain 3, cluster V stitch, on cluster V stitch, I will do one more cluster V stitch in the chain 1 space that we have left in the previous row. Again cluster V stitch, on cluster V stitch, chain 3, we'll go into pineapple area, we'll reduce one more space here, so my 3 spaces in the previous row will become 2 spaces now. Chain 3, cluster V stitch, on cluster V stitch, and again 3 DCs on the very last stitch. We will chain 1 and turn our work. Now we are on to line number 20. So we will be doing 5 DCs in the very first space. 2, 3, 4, 5, chain 2, cluster V stitch, on cluster V stitch, chain 3, we will be in the pineapple area. Now these 2 spaces will become only 1. So in a way our pineapple is complete. Chain 3, cluster V, on cluster V, chain 2. Now 9 DC, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 2 chains, cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, chain 3, pineapple area, so we will be having only one chain 3 space, and in a way our pineapple will be complete. Chain 3, cluster V stitch on cluster V stitch, chain 2. Now we will have 5 DCs in this very first space. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. If you see our swatch, we are exactly where we had started. So when we had started, it was 5 DC, 9 DC and 5 DC. And what we see here is 5 DC, 9 DC and 5 DC. Now what will happen? These lines will close and this pineapple will go further. So the same design will be repeated, that these two 5 will have half pineapples and this 9 DC will have full. So this portion will be repeated after this. It's very visual pattern. It's very easy to remember. Please feel free to contact me if you have any doubts, and thank you for watching this video and encouraging me to take the CAL. Thank you.